Turn on that thing, and he's like doing a Rubik's cube to open it up and figure it out. So no, I don't know. I was sorry for being late. I thought we were starting back at 2:30. So David's like, well, we're probably ready to go, Drew, and it's really good to see everybody again. And I just want to remark on what an excellent job you've done with this Vacation Bible School. You see some of those going away, and it's just not gone away here. There's been lots of effort and lots of work by lots of different people to put on a really nice event for the young people here. and to learn about. And you just never know which of these young people that you're investing in are going to turn out to be real movers and shakers and leaders in the church. I was talking to Sabrina that one of the first things that I did when I came down here was I went to her house for trick or treat, and there was a little tiny blue M&M there that was trick or treating named David Rader. And now he's all grown up and decorating the auditorium, and this is a really nice vacation Bible school, and everybody's to be commended for their hard work. David has asked me to talk about in this session wind and water, the protection of God, and he has assigned me Exodus chapters 13 through 17, so it should be super easy to get through all of that in this 45-minute session. And since I've been assigned all of that rich and fertile ground, I'd like us to start in Matthew chapters 3 and 4. Matthew 3 and 4, some exciting things have happened. Jesus has just been baptized by John the Baptist. An announcement from heaven has been made that he is the Son of God. And immediately after that, the next thing that we read that happens is that the Spirit leads Jesus into the wilderness to be tempted. Now, I don't think that was a thing everybody was looking forward to. He later tells his disciples that when they pray, they ought to pray that they not be led into temptation, right? It was the devil who came after Job. He seeks after us like a roaring lion, but that's not how Jesus faced him. He walked right into the courtroom and allowed himself to be put on trial face to face with the devil. I think the longest trial I've ever had that I've ever tried was 2 weeks, and that felt like an eternity, trying a case for 2 weeks. Jesus is involved in a trial. By some accounts here, it seems like the temptation and the trial is going on the whole time he's there, 40 days and 40 nights out there in the wilderness by Satan. But we only read about the last 3 of those temptations. After Jesus has been there 40 days and 40 nights, he's not eaten during that time period, and he's hungry. And the tempter gets 3 more shots at getting the Son of God to sin, at ruining the plan of redemption, blemishing the great sacrifice, and dooming mankind to share his own fate. Of the 3 times that Jesus is tempted here in the wilderness, 2 of those 3 times he gives a direct, actually all 3 times, all 3 of the times he responds with a direct quote from the book of Deuteronomy. And 2 of those 3 times, the quotation that he makes out of Deuteronomy are describing events that occurred in the book of Exodus. Now, the fact that Jesus used these events from Exodus as part of his arguments to get himself out of these trials that he was in with Jesus suggests that if we're going to study the book of Exodus, these are good places to go to learn what Jesus would want us to know, what helped Jesus escape his trials, and are something that would be worth our time to study during our study of Exodus today. So turn over, if you will, please, to Matthew chapter 4. We're going to read verses 1 through 11. It is Matthew's account of the temptation of Jesus, the trial of Jesus in the wilderness. Then Jesus was led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward hungered. And when the tempter came to him, he said, "If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread." But he answered and said, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God." Then the devil took him up to the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple. And he said to him, "If you are the Son of God, cast yourself down. For it is written, He shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash the foot against a stone. Jesus said unto him, It's written again, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Again the devil took him up to an exceeding high mountain, and showed him all the kingdoms of the world, and the glory of them, and said to him, All these things will I give you, if you will fall down and worship me. And then Jesus said to him, Get thee hence, Satan, for it's written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and only him shalt thou serve. Then the devil left him, and behold, the angels came and ministered to him. Temptation 1, if the devil is being the attorney that is attacking Jesus, he lays a really cunning trap for him. Jesus has just been announced as the Son of God. And throughout the course of his life, as Jesus well knows, his status as God's Son is going to be regularly under attack, right? And so Satan designs this test to simultaneously challenge Jesus' status as the Son of God and then seize on his vulnerabilities as being a Son of Man. He says to Jesus, If you're the Son of God, command these stones that they be made bread. The devil is trying to get Jesus to use his power to gratify his own physical desires. And he does it because Luke 4:2 says that Jesus has eaten nothing during those days. He's hungry. That's the trap for Jesus. That's the temptation. Jesus, if you're the Son of God, take these stones and make them into bread. All right, temptation number 2. The devil, they go from the wilderness to the pinnacle of the temple. I've always been really curious about how that happened. How did they get there? I mean, it doesn't seem to me that they, jumped on a donkey together and just, traveled on down to the temple and climbed up to the pinnacle of the temple. It seems to me they probably just sort of appeared there, teleported there. I don't know. It doesn't say. But it seems like they probably did. But they're up there on the pinnacle of the temple. This is probably Herod's portico. Josephus says about Herod's portico this: While the valley itself was very deep, and its bottom could scarcely be seen when looked down from above, in addition to the vastly high elevation of the portico was placed on that height, insomuch that if anyone looked down from the summit of the roof, combining the two altitudes on the stretch of vision, he would be giddy, while his sight could not reach the bottom of such an intense depth. H. Leo Bowles, he says that from what he understands about the depth that would have been from this pinnacle of the temple, that a fall from there would be fatal. And from these dizzying heights, Satan launches his next temptation after the first one had failed. Now this miracle, if Jesus did it, he's trying to get him to jump off of the pinnacle of the temple so that angels will catch him. And this would happen, presumably, where this is going on, in front of a lot of people. And the design of the temptation appears to be not for his own physical gratification this time, but here, jump off of this portico, and if you're the Son of God, show it, prove it to us by letting the angels catch you and demonstrating to all these people. Now, all those people are not going to be, if they've not been persuaded by anything else, they're not going to be persuaded by that. We just saw that the children of Israel had seen all this incredible stuff that had happened in Egypt, and they still doubted. But that's Satan's temptation, right? Do this incredible thing. And Satan, getting the idea perhaps from Jesus, quotes Scripture to him. He specifically quotes Psalm 91, 11 through 12. And that passage in Psalms is beautiful. And it's about the protection of God's people. It discusses how God protects his people. And it ends this way: For he shall give his angels charge over thee, and keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thy foot dash a stone. The devil is saying to Jesus, look, God has promised that he'll protect you. God protects his righteous people. That's what he says here. That's what's in the book. Do you believe that or not? Do you think God's with you or don't you? Won't you prove it? If your God can really protect you, prove it. If you believe your God can protect you, prove it. Jump off of this portico in such a distance to the ground that you can't even see it, that would kill you if you landed. And prove your faith and prove the protection and the power of God. Well, Jesus responds to both of these temptations. As we all know, with the words, it's written. Vincent says that when he says it is written, what that word means is it is written and it stands written. Which is, here's what it says, it's always going to say that. You know, it is written and it stands written. And in response to his first temptation, he quotes from Deuteronomy 8 and verse 3. And I want to read the context of that. Deuteronomy 8, beginning in verse 1, where that section says, all the commandments which I give thee this day shall you observe and do, that you may live and multiply, and go in and possess the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers. And thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee, to prove thee, and to know what was in thine heart, whether thou wouldest keep his commandments or no. And he humbled thee, and suffered thee to hunger, and fed thee with manna, which thou knowest not, neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doth man live. Thy raiment waxed not old upon thee, neither did thy foot swell these 40 years. Thou shalt also consider in thine heart, that as a man chastiseth his son, so the Lord chastiseth thee. Therefore thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord, walk in his ways, and fear him. That was the section of Scripture that Jesus was responding to on the first temptation. On the second temptation, he quotes Deuteronomy 6 and verse 16, which says, you shall not tempt the Lord your God as you tempted him in Massah. Now, both of the events, the temptation of the Lord in Massah and the original feeding of the people with manna from heaven, occur in our assigned text for today. The manna in Exodus 16 and the temptation of God in Massah in Exodus 17. And so going there, I think, will shed a lot of light on what Jesus, our Lord and our King, wants us to know about those passages and how we can use those passages to assist us in the temptations that occur in our life. Okay, Exodus 16. We pick up and we're almost exactly 1 month from the original Passover. We're in a place called the Wilderness of Sin. I read somewhere where you actually ought to pronounce that the Wilderness of Sin, but it's written sin and I sort of like, that sounds like a much more ominous place to be, the Wilderness of Sin. But they're in the Wilderness of Sin. It's only about a month since they crossed the Red Sea, passed over. God passed over them, and they were delivered from the Egyptian army. Now that means the children of Israel have very recently seen with their own eyes the Nile's river turn to blood, the land of Egypt being swarmed with frogs and lice and flies and locusts. They've seen the livestock in Egypt die. They have seen the Egyptians afflicted with boils and darkness, and their people were not affected. And they have seen, within the last month, the death of all the firstborn children in Egypt, and them being freed from slavery, and them then leaving, going out, thinking that they're free when Pharaoh changed his mind. These people, a month ago, 1 month ago, they thought they were free. They look back, and here comes the Egyptian army. You know, the army of the most powerful nation of the world. And now they're hemmed in. They got the Red Sea in front of them, and they got the Egyptian army behind them. And it looks like they're trapped. And Moses says in Exodus 14:13, "Do not be afraid, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians who you see today, you shall see against no more. The Lord will fight for you." A cloud, the cloud that was leading them, shifts from the front to the back. It expands between them and the pursuing Egyptian army. It makes it so they can't see. The Egyptian army can't see what's going on, but it's a light to the children of Israel. And then a strong east wind blows all night, and the walls of water of the Red Sea part to the right and left. And now you've got, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people, maybe multiple millions of people walking through the parted Red Sea. The waters are parted in a heap like a wall. They're walking on dry land. I went back and listened to Brandon's Exodus class from 2018. And you guys are really blessed with wonderful teachers. I see many of them here today. I've been mentioning a lot of firsts that happened when I was when I got here to North Lexington, almost 20 years ago now. And one of the first classes I was ever in was Dr. Stephen Beeson's class about Proverbs. And one of the first things he said is, he says, now wisdom is, that word is chokmah. Now, I was from Paintsville, and we didn't talk about chokmah in our Bible classes. I'll just tell you that. He was getting into the underlying languages, and it was just a really beautiful study. I still think about that study all the time. And I think often about how fortunate that I was to come through with such great teachers, many of you who are here here today. But I was listening to Brandon's class, and he sort of hypothesized, I don't want to misstate you, Brandon, that it's possible that just nobody could even see the water. That it was that was how big the gap was. Brandon's looking at me like, I didn't say that. But just dry land, that's had the power of God. The winds that blew. And they walked through on the dry land. And then here comes the Egyptians. And, it all falls on them and covers them, and they're all dead, all of them. And their corpses are washing up onto the seashore. And the children of Israel are seeing this. Could you ever get that image out of your head of that? Of you walking through that water and then looking back and that army, gone, all dead. The power, the protection of God. They crossed it on the dry land. And in Exodus 14:30, so the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw that the Egyptians were dead on the seashore. Thus Israel saw the great work that the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Happily ever after. And the story ended happily ever after. They always believed him. And these mighty works that were done, they never changed their mind about it. Right? You can imagine a world in which that would be true, right? That you see this incredible sight and you say, I'll just tell you what, whatever happens to me, I ain't messing with God. Because I ain't wanting frogs and, the water dropping on my head and darkness. I'm not for that. You can imagine a world in that, but that's not what we see. They're led through the Red Sea. There's a pillar of cloud that's leading them by day, pillar of fire by night. And they come into the wilderness of sin, and that brings us to Exodus 16, beginning in verse 1. It says this, and they journeyed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the second month, all right, remember now, you have Nisan, or that's the first month, and you have the 14th and the 15th. That's when you're doing the Passover and the Passover feast. So that's why we know we're 1 month away. They departed from the land of Egypt. The whole congregation of Israel was still feeling great about God. knew all along, no matter what happened in the wilderness of sin. They saw the signpost going into that said wilderness of sin on it, and they said, that doesn't sound like a great place to go, but we're with you, God, all the way. No. The whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said to them, "Oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat and we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out to this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." I read this and I thought of my family vacation. I just got back from Rosemary Beach, and we made a decision to load up my 9 and 7-year-old in the car and take them down to the Florida Panhandle. It's about 9 hours from London. It felt like a million miles. I live in London. We got to Williamsburg. That's an hour away. And Jake was in the back seat going, I think I'm going to throw up. I think I'm car sick. We were an hour away in our 9-hour trip. Every 5 minutes, somebody was needing to pee, or needed something to eat, or needed to make a stop. We finally make it to we rented a beach house. I mean, that's great. It was beautiful. It had a spiral staircase going through the middle. I mean, the lap of luxury. My 9-year-old walks in, looks at his Nintendo, and said, "This internet's not nearly as good as it is at home." We are steps from the beach. I mean, you had to walk kind of down a little road, and we walked to the beach. We get to the beach. My sister-in-law is there. My sister-in-law, first of all, the beach is beautiful. White sanded beach, beautiful blue waters, calm as could be. Just the sight of paradise, the white shores of paradise. My sister-in-law meets us at the beach and says, "Boy, there's a pack of sharks right through here. It just swam right by my ankle. We're going to get our arms bit off in here." So I couldn't help but to think about my trip to Rosemary Beach when I'm reading about this trip to the children of Israel. A month ago, they're a month removed of being delivered from slavery, where their lives were made bitter, and they were having to make bricks without the straw, and their kids were getting thrown in the river by Pharaoh. And now a month later, when their belly starts to growl, they can't remember it that way. Here's what they remember: the pots of meat. I don't know if any of you were there in the teen group. We talked about the pots of meat. I asked them if anybody knew what potted meat was. I'll just tell you, not many of them did. Your brother was the only one who raised his hand, but he didn't seem like he'd been eating much potted meat, I'll just tell you. But I don't know what a pot of meat is, but it sounds gross, okay? But they're thinking to themselves, they can't remember being a slave, or their kids being thrown into the river, or having to make bricks all the time, or having taskmasters. All they can remember, if I could only have a pot of meat, I'd be feeling good. And the whole congregation complains to Moses. And they say, "You know what? I wish that God would have just killed us in Egypt, as opposed to being here, starving to death in the wilderness of sin." But they didn't starve to death. They did not die. They didn't run out of food. Instead, God provided for them and protected them. They woke up one day, the dew lifts, and there's a little circle thing on the ground. And they say, "What in the world's this? What's this?" And the name that ultimately got given to the circle thing means what, or what is it? That name we all know well is manna. And Moses says, "That's the bread that God has given you to eat." It is described as being like a wafer made with honey, like a pastry. It's described other places as being angel food or bread from heaven. God has provided that for them. They didn't make the bread. They didn't shop for the groceries. They didn't work and buy it. God just made it appear there, and He blessed them with this. And in doing this, He showed them that they could count on him, that he provides for, and that he protects his people. Unfortunately, the children of Israel don't learn the lesson of the manna. And that brings us to chapter 17, to a place called, at least when we meet it the first time, a place called Rephidim. And I want to read the first 7 verses of Exodus 17, which says this: Then all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin, according to the commandment of the Lord, and they camped in Rephidim. But there was no water there for the people to drink. And let me just pause there for a second. So the people said, I bet God will fix it. I mean, he made that bread come out of heaven, and it's awesome, you know. And you saw what he did to the water in the Red Sea. Who knows what he can do with water? Well, that's not what they say. Verse 2. Therefore the people contended with Moses, and they said, please, Moses, talk to God for us. Help us. No, they say, give us water that we may drink. So Moses said to them, why are you contending with me? Why do you tempt the Lord? And the people thirsted there for water. And the people complained against Moses. Why is it that you brought us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, what shall I do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me. And the Lord said to Moses, go on before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel. Take in your hand your rod with which you struck the river and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock of Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and the water will come out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. So he called the name of the place Massah. That name sounds familiar from Matthew 14. He called the name of the place Massah and Meribah because the contention of the children of Israel and because they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? All right. Basically, the children of Israel have come out of the wilderness of Sin to a place that was called Rephidim. They had all the food they needed, but there's no water there. Now listen, of all the times in the history of the earth, we probably are the worst positioned to criticize the children of Israel for being mad about not having water. The recommended consumption for American adults of water is 2.7 to 3.7 liters of water per day. I wasn't really nervous about saying that statistic when I wrote it down, but Dr. Beeson probably knows the statistic, and he's probably making a note back there. That is insufficient water for, so I don't know. Let me just say this. That's what I read. Consult Dr. Beeson for your water needs. In 2022, Americans drank over 11 billion gallons of water from single-serving water bottles. More than $2 billion in reusable water bottles were sold in 2022. That's a $500 million increase from the 2 years earlier. And that brings me to a company called Stanley. Stanley was basically helping blue-collar coal miners back in 1913 when they produced their hammer-tone green bottle that kept their coffee warm and ready to go. In 2016, they launched a $45 40-ounce quencher bottle in an array of beautiful colors. Their revenues went from $73 to $750 million in 4 years. They came out with the Starbucks pink cup and sold it only at Target, and people were camping out the door for that. They were fist fighting in the Target over a water bottle. They were selling them on the internet for $200. Now that's a water bottle. My wife doesn't have that color, but she's got one. And I'll just tell you, I'm afraid it's going to just merge with her hand. She never goes anywhere without that. I mean, it's like at any moment she may be parched with thirst and need to have just a cold drink from heaven right from her hand. And that's a lot of people. The courtroom deputy in the courtroom that I practice, she's got a water bottle that's so big I could climb inside and screw the top down on. I mean, I don't know how she stays without a bathroom break in the courtroom. She picks that thing up. It's enormous. But Brandon's got a water bottle right now. He took a drink right now. Brandon just did. That's how thirsty Brandon is, you know. And so the fact that our culture carries water bottles around with them everywhere they go to get a drink suggests just how bad it would be if you were stuck in a place that that didn't have any water, and they demand, God, give us water. Moses, give us water. They accuse Moses of bringing them out of Egypt for them and their cattle to die. It gets so bad, Moses thinks they're going to kill him. Now you think about that. Moses is the one raising up the rod and talking to God. You're going to kill him? I mean, that's got pretty rough. And the indication here is that even Moses seems to panic and goes to God and says, what am I going to do? And we're told that the children of Israel, they tempt God, which I understand to mean they doubted him. They tested him. Where is the water? I thought God was with us. Is God with us? God was literally with them. You know, I, as far as I can tell, I mean, I don't know whether this happened in the morning or the night, but very probably when they're saying this, there is a pillar of either cloud or fire with them that's been leading them around. Now, I guess you could say, I mean, that's a weird phenomenon that cloud is up there. But I mean, pillars of fire, that's pretty rare in my experience, you know. So they are saying, where is God? Why isn't God helping us? Is he here? He's there. They can see a representation of him, okay? God was there. But again, they don't thirst to death. God provides for them. God tells Moses to go before the people, and God would stand on the rock before him. Now, there's a lot of different theories about what that means, but God is certainly, it's suggesting that God's making himself even more known, that he is there. And he tells Moses to take the same rod that he used to cross the Red Sea, strike the rock, and when he did, water would come forth for people to drink. And Moses then calls that place Massa, because they tempted God and asked if he was there or not. Now, one other interesting thing, Brandon mentioned this in his, mentioned part of this. I won't saddle him with the second part of what I'm going to say. But the first part of what I said, what I'm about to say, Brandon said in his class, which was a very interesting thought to me, which is this, that Horeb, which is mentioned here, which is where this rock is another name for Sinai. And so they're at Sinai. They're going to stay there for 11 months. So there is an indication here that the rock is spewing forth water, not just to give them like it's not like when you hit the water fountain and then it quits. There's a suggestion here that it's going to bring water the whole time. The 11 months that they're there, there's just water now for them to be there. That may be why Brandon hypothesized that the invading army comes in that chapter. Remember that story about her holding up the arms? Well, maybe that army comes to get some water. They found a source of water. They're actually, now again, I'm not accusing Brandon of this, but I read an interesting little book where it suggested that there is some evidence, and there was an old Jewish text that's subscribed to this, that rock followed them around from Sinai. And why would you say that? Well, the example, the evidence they gave is 200 miles later, when Moses, strikes the rock again instead of speaking to it, God refers to it as the rock. And 1 Corinthians 10 and 1 through 4, Paul is making an analogy there, but he talks about the rock that followed them around. So that's an interesting idea that it's beyond that. But either way, this shows God providing for and protecting his people. All right, from one wilderness back to the other. Let's go back to Jesus in the wilderness, Matthew chapter 4. Let's circle back to see what Jesus wanted us to know about these two events. And that's this. Even when he'd been led into the wilderness, even when he had been tempted for 40 days, even when he had not eaten a bite that whole time and he was hungry, Jesus' citations to these scriptures show that there was not a doubt in his mind that God was with him, that God was there. He didn't need to ask whether God was with him or not. He didn't need to jump off the temple and have angels catch him to see whether he was there or not. God was present. God was faithful. And Jesus knew that putting God to the test only demonstrates a lack of our own faith. And that is proven by Deuteronomy 6 and verse 16, the temptation of God in Massa, which Jesus quotes to the devil. And not only that, Jesus knew that God was present, but Jesus also knew that God was going to protect and to provide for him. Jesus' focus was, unlike the children of Israel, not on his stomach, not on his physical needs. Jesus prioritized spiritual obedience and righteousness because spiritual dependence and faith in God, following his word, is more important nourishment than bread. Now, if he took care of that, God would provide for his physical needs just as he had done for the children of Israel back in the wilderness of sin and Massa. And that's what the broader context teaches us in Deuteronomy 8:3. God allowed them to hunger and then provided for them a formative test to teach them a lesson, that he might make thee know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. What does Jesus mean by these quotations to Deuteronomy and these references to Exodus? He wants us to know. God wanted the children of Israel to know that God is present for his people, that he protects them, and that he provides for their needs. And if we'll seek God first and put God first in our life and we'll be faithful, then he will take, in a spiritual way, he will take care of us in a physical way. That's what Jesus told Satan, those lessons, that they were written, that they stand written, they always have been, and they always will be. Now, Jesus went on to demonstrate to the devil that in fact, even though he didn't take the bait and sin, that in fact, that God was with them. And he shows it in a couple ways. Matthew 4 and verse 11, when the devil leaves him, what happens? The angels do come. The angels do come and take care of him and minister to him. And then in John 6, Jesus makes bread. And he teaches in John 6, he also refers back to the manna account and teaches a lesson that is directly relevant to what he knew when he was confronting the devil. John 6, beginning verse 26, Jesus answered and said, most assuredly I say to you, you seek me. Remember, he had taken the 5 loaves and he had multiplied it so that the multitude could have enough and left over to eat. He goes away the next day, the multitude comes after him. And he says to that multitude, most assuredly I say to you, you seek me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate of the loaves and were filled. Do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you. Because God the Father has set his seal on him. Then they said to him, what shall we do that we may work the works of God? And Jesus answered and said to them, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he sent. Therefore they said to him, what sign will you perform then, that we may see it and believe you? What work will you do? Our fathers ate manna in the desert. As it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Then Jesus said to them, most assuredly I say to you, Moses did not give you bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Then they said to him, Lord, give us this bread always. And Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. But I said to you that you have seen me and do not believe. All that the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will by no means cast out. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me. This is the will of the Father who sent me, that of all he has given me I should lose nothing, but should raise it up in the last day. And this is the will of him that sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him may have everlasting life. And I will raise him up at the last day. Jesus' defense to Satan is a lesson to the multitude, a lesson that Jesus tried to teach that God tried to teach the children of Israel in the wilderness. No matter your physical circumstances of life, for those who are faithful, God is always present, He is always providing, and He is always protecting us. The Bible is replete, Scripture is replete with examples of God being present and protecting and providing for His people. He tells Joshua right after Moses, I'm just going to be strong, be of good courage. I'm going to be with you just like I was Moses. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. You're going to prosper. You're going to have good success. Now, Hebrews 12, 5 through 7, let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things that you have. For He Himself have said, I'll never leave you or forsake you. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? Psalm 46, the Lord is my refuge and strength. He is a very present help in times of trouble. Acts 17, 24, Paul on Mars Hill says that God is never very far from any of us. Hebrews 10, verse 13, no temptation has overtaken you except that is common to man, but God is faithful. He will not allow you to be tempted above what you're able, but with every temptation, He will make a way of escape. 2 Peter 2:9, the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations and to reserve the unjust under punishment for the day of judgment. Matthew 6, which is a verse you probably already thought of, verse 31, therefore do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For these things the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knows you need these things, but seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all of these things will be added to you. I got my hair cut in anticipation for seeing you fine people today. And I was in the chair and talking to the barber, and I said to the barber, I'm getting ready to preach a few sermons, and he said, what are you talking about? And I said, Exodus, about the manna, and about the water from the rock. And I said, you got any tips or thoughts or sage insights that I can share with the people that I'm going to be talking to? And he said, when I think about manna, and when I think about the provision and the protection of the Lord, I think about Lamentations 3, verses 22 through 24, which says this, words you all know. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed, because His compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in Him. Every morning, the children of Israel woke up, and God provided for them exactly the amount they needed. Everyone had, and nobody lacks. And let me tell you this. Every morning you wake up and God provides for you. And He protects you. His mercies, His compassions never come to an end. He is faithful. Great is His faithfulness. They are new every morning. And our portion is the Lord. The Lord is my portion. He gives us what we need. He gives us the blessings that we need. He provides for us. He protects us. Great is His faithfulness. The book of Exodus teaches us about God's deliverance and how those who are delivered are supposed to live in their freedom. For those of us who have been delivered by God out of the bondage of sin and into Christ, let us never let hunger or thirst or trials or temptations or any physical thing on the earth give us any doubt about the faithfulness of God. He is with us, and He will protect us. Thank you for your time.